Chuck Rosenberg, Andrew Weissman, and Matt Miller have opened a few doors. I'm going to pull them wide open. I'm going to play some of the pieces of testimony that they mentioned. But I want to start with your top line observations. As someone who worked in the Justice Department, who loved the Justice Department, I spoke to other Justice Department officials, even some who were in that building in the time of Trump. And I always make these comparisons to try to explain to my Democratic friends just how bad they are. They're so bad that Jeff Sessions looks like the person who attempted to do this job with the most integrity over the last 4 years. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, 4 words I never thought I would utter. I miss Jeff Sessions, Nicolle. It's absolutely stunning.
Me neither.
You know, here's the thing. The smartest people that I know embrace ambiguity or complexity or nuance. There is a lot of gray in this world, but he doesn't allow any of that to creep into his testimony. And I'm always worried about somebody who has no doubt about everything, right? I mean, at the very least, Nicolle, at the very least, you would have to admit, if you were Attorney General Barr and you were being honest, that the perceptions of what he did are troubling, whether it's the mischaracterization of the Mueller report or the intervention in the Flynn and Stone cases or the clearing of Lafayette Square. But to his way of thinking, or at least his way of explaining, there is no ambiguity in his life, and everybody else is just flat out wrong. And we see these things as alumni of the Department of Justice, and we're deeply troubled by it for a reason. And it's because we understand that perception matters a lot. Even if he has a legal answer, and he did, to some of the issues, perception matters a lot. He doesn't seem to care at all about it.
You know, Donna Edwards, Chuck Rosenberg, as he often does, widened the lens and made the perfect point. We live in a country that is suffering. I think today we crossed the threshold where 150,000 of our fellow Americans who were alive 6 months ago have now lost their lives in the coronavirus pandemic. There are uprisings on the streets of American cities, and as Thomas Friedman has written, it is Donald Trump's version of wagging the dog. And again, to Chuck's point, there may be technical legal defenses of pieces of these stories for the president, but there is such an inability, such an incapacity, such an unwillingness to speak to anybody living in the country and struggling or suffering or questioning whether this Justice Department even pretends to believe that its job is to do justice for every American.
Well, I think today what you saw with the Attorney General is that he may have served the President of the United States well in his testimony, but he did not serve the interest of justice or the American people well at all, and certainly not the career men and women who work at the Department of Justice. His idea that answering questions from members of Congress, he seemed very put out by having to do that. It appeared as though he would take any question and try to nuance his way through it or to filibuster his way. I think that's why you saw so many members of Congress seeking to reclaim their time, because they realized that he would be easy at filibustering 5 minutes of their time to try to get questions or statements onto the record. And I think that he demonstrated to the American people that he cares less about justice than he does about defending what is both questionable and in some cases patently unconstitutional actions by this administration and this president.
And among those are the president's commutation of Roger Stone. Matt Miller, you mentioned it. I want to play you that line of questioning from Congressman Swalwell. We'll talk about it on the other side.
At your confirmation hearing, you were asked, do you believe a president could lawfully issue a pardon in exchange for the recipient's promise to not incriminate him? You said, no.
Not to what?
That would be a crime. You were asked, could a president issue a pardon in exchange for the recipient's promise to not incriminate him? And you responded, no, that would be a crime. Is that right?
Yes, I said that.
You said a crime. You didn't say it'd be wrong. You didn't say it'd be unlawful. You said it would be a crime. And when you said that a president swapping a pardon to silence a witness would be a crime, you were promising the American people that if you saw that, you would do something about it. Is that right?
That's right.
Now, Mr. Barr, are you investigating Donald Trump for commuting the prison sentence of his longtime friend and political advisor, Roger Stone?
No.
Why not?
Why should I?
Matt Miller, why not? Why should I? Because it's stunning.
Yeah. I thought that was really the most revealing exchange of the entire hearing. First, when Congressman Swalwell asked the Attorney General about the sentencing change and asked whether he'd intervened in any other sentences, and he was unable to provide an example of any other sentences where he had intervened. And then this exchange where he not only, kind of wouldn't get into an examination of the underlying facts, by the way, some of which were in the Mueller report, some of which have only become known to us recently as they've been unsealed, but the Attorney General has known for over a year now. But then you had this exchange where Congressman Swalwell read one of the president's tweets to the Attorney General, where the president talked about Roger Stone's gut for essentially not flipping on him and testifying against him. And the Attorney General said he wasn't aware of the tweet, which was, I think, a bizarre statement because that tweet was in the Mueller report. It was in one of the most important sections of the Mueller report examining the president's conduct and whether he obstructed justice. I think this goes again to the point that we're all making, which is if you're anything but a partisan Republican, if you watch this hearing and watch the Attorney General's answers, it's hard to have faith that he's doing anything like guaranteeing equal justice under the law.
And I think in a race to the bottom, this next moment also stands out as one of the most haunting ones. Andrew Weissman, I want to show you what he had to say about election interference, not the 2016 attack on our democracy from Russia, but the possibility of an attack in 2020. Here he is saying it depends on what kind of assistance is offered. Let's watch. We'll talk about it on the other side.
In April of this year, the Republican-led Senate Intelligence Committee unanimously found that Russia interfered with our elections and attempted to undermine American democracy, correct?
And I said so, too.
Is it ever appropriate, sir, for the president to solicit or accept foreign assistance in an election?
It depends what kind of assistance.
Is it ever appropriate for the president or presidential candidate to accept or solicit foreign assistance of any kind in his or her election?
No, it's not appropriate.
Okay, I'm glad. Sorry you had to struggle with that.
Andrew, I've read this 3 times. I was sure it was transcribed incorrectly. And I just want to ask you, I want to take this line by line. The Republican-led Senate Intel Committee is cited. Barr seems to want a popsicle or a lollipop for saying, and I said so, and I agreed with Chairman Burr. And then he struggles. He's asked this question, is it ever appropriate for the president to solicit or accept foreign interference in an election? His under oath on the record answer is, quote, depends what kind of assistance. What kind of assistance is ever legal from a foreign power in an American election? What is Barr trying to normalize there before he got caught and given the opportunity to put the toothpaste back in the tube?
So first, there is a federal statute that makes it a crime to accept or solicit any assistance. So the congressman had it totally right. So the attorney general's initial statement was just wrong. And you could see what was going on there was that he was caught because he knew what the evidence was with respect to the president and the evidence with respect to the impeachment. And he was trying to duck it. And so that doesn't really speak well for his taking the oath that he was under seriously. He eventually got to what was an obvious answer, which is no, you cannot accept or solicit any foreign assistance. And it goes to sort of a larger point that people have been getting at, which is the partisan nature of what the Attorney General is up to today, where he talked about the Russian hoax, but at the same time, he was willing to say that there clearly is going to be foreign interference in connection with having mail-in voting But he also had to admit he had zero evidence to support that. So you had enormous dichotomies between the truth and a partisan effort on his part to support the president.
Chuck Rosenberg, I don't want to move on from this topic just yet, because I think if you stitch together, and some of this is on us, we cover these as separate beats, Donald Trump's not daily, almost hourly deluge of tweets seeking to delegitimize an election that hasn't happened yet, that he hasn't lost yet. Attorney General Barr seeming to struggle with a question about it depends what kind of foreign interference you're talking about before, as Andrew just said, cleaning up that answer. A half a dozen calls that Donald Trump has had with Vladimir Putin, in which not only have the Russian bounties put on the heads of American soldiers not come up, but we don't have any sense, any readout. John Bolton writes in his book, there are rarely, if any, foreign policy advisors or staffers or even stenos on those calls. What are we to, with eyes wide open this time, right? It's been 4 years. What do you think our scenarios are for November?
Well, one thing I wanted to mention, Nicolle, I've learned today that I have something in common with the Attorney General, which surprised me. I don't read the president's tweets either. You know, if I were in his position, I think I would do the exact same thing. I'd stay far away from it. What do I think is in store for November? You know, I think it depends. If there's a decisive victory on either the Republican or Democratic side, well, on the Republican side, it's easy. The president will accept that. And if it's a decisive victory on the Democratic side, he probably has to accept that, both legally and politically. But what I worry about is the scenario where it's narrow, or where it takes a very, very long time to count the votes, or where we end up, as in 2000, with a decisive state such as Florida, where it's difficult to count the vote and we end up in the courts. And I think all of those scenarios play into the president's conspiracy theories. And in terms of having the right person in the right place at the right time, this Attorney General seems to care more about pleasing the boss than adhering to his oath. Look, Bill Barr is a smart man, but I fundamentally disagree with how he's approaching the job. And to the point I tried to make earlier, the fact that he sees no ambiguity or nuance in anything that he does, or can't understand why critics would be upset with the perception that he has created around his Justice Department, sort of baffles me. And so I worry a lot about November. Not that we won't eventually get to the right place as a country, we tend to do that, but that it's going to be ugly, potentially for a few months.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.